Ближче ближче сьогодні до теми зустрічі. Основними заданнями, які ми ставили
Let
собі
me
перед тим, як починати
elaborate on the topic of our meeting and our objective. The objective of our study was to take a closer look at the specifics of finding funding for the Ukrainian municipalities and communities. After the full-scale invasion of Russia, the communities didn't stand behind. Some suffered a lot of damage, and some had to host IDPs and provide them with housing. Local communities were also creating a conducive environment for the relocated businesses who had to leave the war zone with the active hostilities. The urgent task for the governments at all levels is to cooperate with the civil society and international partners. Apart from that, there is a need to create the mechanisms to uh, find necessary financial resources that are needed in order to recover and reconstruct the Ukrainian municipalities. We also believe that reconstruction and recovery of Ukraine has to be based on the principles of sustainability and eco-friendliness. We understand that there are three levels of interaction, and we analyzed the funding on three levels, including international, national, and local. We will elaborate on that a bit later today. In our study, we covered some complicated issues, and there are three publications that are dedicated to some specific topics. They were daily updates, and we had to keep up with the events that were unfolding very quickly. We will exemplify our theoretical part with the success stories from the communities. Today, we will share the best practices and the success stories from those who took part in this process. We will explain how the decisions were made along the way. Therefore, I would like to give the floor to our speakers. We do not have much time, and now I will give the floor to Maria Lukyanova, the National Coordinator for Bankwatch in Ukraine, and she will elaborate on the access to funding for the communities. What are the hurdles in access to funding for communities, and where is the space for improvement? Thank you, Vlada, for giving me the floor. Good morning, dear participants. Let me start sharing my screen now.
Все в порядку, видно?
Can you see my presentation?
Ми разом
Yes. Okay. Jointly with the Bankwatch and Eco Action teams, during the last year, we've been looking into the challenges that Ukrainian communities had to tackle in the wake of the hostilities. Especially, we took a look into these processes from the perspective of Euro integration. We have come up with this study, which is very extensive, and we engaged a number of consultants who will tell us more about their contribution to the study. The processes that we were looking into were rather complicated, and we decided to divide them into three levels. The lowest level, that is the closest to the citizens, the level where the decisions are made quickly and solutions are found in the swift manner. This is the local level. This is the level where the communities have their proper funds, and this is the level where they are able to engage civil society organizations in order to tackle the challenges of the wartime. The second level was rather complicated for us. We were trying to get to grips with the policies in Ukraine we wanted to understand who is responsible for what, and we wanted to take a closer look at the partners that could be found for the communities. Therefore, this is the second chapter of our study, the national level. And the third chapter, the third level is international level. Cooperation with donor institutions, engagement of humanitarian missions, and look for financial support. At the lowest level, at the local level, we realized that the communities are using their proper funds, their proper budgets. We analyzed how those budgets work. On this slide, you can see the proper funds of communities and the subsidies. We see that in average, the budgets of communities in Ukraine are comprised of the proper funds by 75%, and the rest is financed, is subsidized from the national budget. We also see that in occupied territories and deoccupied territories, the share of subsidies is much higher. But we also should pay attention to the fact that we do not have the recent data for all the regions, and some regions we're not using all the opportunities of relocation of IDPs and businesses. Our assumptions were also confirmed by the public map from the portal on decentralization. In orange, we can see those communities that are most heavily subsidized from the national budget. And you see that those are the communities that require external funding since they do not have that much of their own revenue. And now let's take a look at the official statistics provided by the Ministry of Finance. Starting 2022, our international partners supported us with funding. And we see that the amount of funding quadrupled since 2022. We see that the list of the institutions, international financial institutions that are working closely with Ukraine are on the slide. It is RBRD, EBRD, EIB. You see on this slide the share of local budgets and the national budget. The share of international financial assistance in national budget and local budget changed a lot in 2022. This light green color is the budget for the local budget, and we see that in general the share was about 12% of international funds that were allocated to the local budgets, for instance, in 2020. But in 2022, the international financial assistance is provided to the national level by 100%. It all goes to the national budget. On this slide, you can see the architecture of national policies on reconstruction and recovery. The parliament is in charge of the policy making. The government is in charge of the enactment of pieces of legislation. Apart from that, there is a ministry for restoration that is in charge of restoration and recovery of Ukraine, and there is the Ministry of the Economy that is shaping Ukrainian plan for recovery and the use of Ukraine facility.
наскільки здійснюється на національному рівні.
Policy
Це державним
implementation.
агентством з питань відновлення,
It
і
takes
яке
place
має
at the
свої
national level.
KPI
There is
роль,
the state
а також
agency
місцеве
on
самоврядування,
restoration with its branch
різні
offices in the regions
посильні
and local
агентства.
governments
І
at the
як
levels
результат
of
відбуваються процеси і
oblast
підвищення
councils and
коштів.
local
На
councils.
процесі відновлення обов'язковим є залучення
If there is a funding
правоохоронних
on
органів,
restoration
державного
and
агентства
recovery,
будь-якого
there should
боку.
be monitoring
Дуже
and
добре, що в Україні
oversight,
створена
including the state audit
імплементація
service and
реформи
the accounting
Національної ради з
chamber.
питань відновлення при президентові України. Але є одне
It is good
але.
news that the National Council on Restoration has been established, but there is a caveat to it. Neither representatives from civil society nor representatives of businesses are
Інші учасники
invited as
процесу
members to
фактично
this council.
бачать ці виклики і оперативно на них реагують. Це є місцевий бізнес,
This
це є наші донори, це є громадяни,
this
це є
council is in charge of restoration, but businesses and the civil society are the most responsive
на
the
національному
needs
рівні за рахунок того,
on
що
restoration and
багато
recovery of
залежить
Ukraine.
фактично від
At the
державного
national level, many
бюджету,
communities depend highly from the
зараз починається
national
22 року,
budget,
контролюється безпосередньо в
and
державному бюджеті.
um,
Ми вивчили можливості і досвід
we looked into the
розвитку
opportunities
по проектах
for
розвитку,
community
проектах
to
відновлення з
use the
національного фонду,
funds,
які фінансувалися
the
з
state
місцевого
funds,
державного бюджету. Це
the
Державний
state
фонд
fund
регіонального
for
розвитку,
regional development,
благоустрою
the
і
energy
створення
efficiency fund,
під
and
часи
the
повномасштабного вторгнення, коли
newly
ліквідація
created
наслідків
fund
збройної
that is
агресії.
called the
Фактично
Fund for
кожен з цих
Elimination of
фондів
the
мав
Consequences of
передбачений
the
в
Armed
місцевому
Aggression.
державному бюджеті, однак
These
передбачити
funds are
державному
financed from the
бюджету
national
обов'язково
budget,
ефективно
but
також необхідно
the Energy Efficiency Fund starting
видатки
2022
на виклики військового часу
has
і на
changed its disbursement of fund.
стійкість
The
країни.
priorities are now given to
Фінансування
the
коштів за
security
ефективне
issues
використання
and
державного
security
матеріалу,
budget items.
для
Therefore,
реалізації
this
наших до 2023
funding
року
from the Energy
зобов'язань
Efficiency
залишки
Fund has
фактично
been
від початку тероборони
suspended
вони фактично
temporarily.
використали, і там відбуваються певні моменти з наповненням державного
There are
фонду,
certain
фонду
issues related to this
фонду.
fund,
Так
and
само
it is mostly dependent on
дуже
the
важливий
assistance
момент,
coming
який
from
є
our
в
donors.
роботі даних фондів, це те, що фонд
Another
енергоефективності
important
фінансується також як
factor to
державного
mention
бюджету, але і з
about this
іншого
fund
міжнародного
is the
фонду,
fact
інших
that the
міжнародних
Energy
фондів. І
Efficiency
це
Fund
значно
is
посилює
financed not
здібність України
only
до
from the
саме
national budget, but
ефективних
also with
видатків
the
для національної
international
галузі.
funds, funds
Відвідини
coming from our
напряму
donors.
може напряму впливати
We
суттєво
have an
на
opportunity to
наші позиції.
engage more funds
Це те, що фонд
since
енергоефективності
the
фінансувався за
some
рахунок
donors
створення
could
фінансових
not
організацій,
finance
що вони
security
зараз є
programs.
регульованими текстами.
Therefore, they
Вони
could
взяли на
contribute
себе
to the
частину
Energy
ризику
Efficiency
при
Fund. And there
державному
is
бюджеті для того, щоб
a
громади далі могли
process of
реалізувати безпеку
negotiations
даного фонду.
ongoing now so
І
that
процес розподілу
more donor aid
фінансування
could be
у
engaged.
нас дещо відрізняється в цих фондах.
Disbursement of these funds have
є
has
позитивним
in
з
its
регіональних
own
комісій
specifics.
затверджено.
There are
Кошти
regional
громадського
commissions
сектору
and
до проєктів
civil society has to participate in the commissions that are considering the applications and making decisions. One third of the lineup of these commissions has to be made of the representatives of civil society.
для громад. І плюс в тому, що є наглядова рада
There is also the
які якраз затверджують проект
board
програми. Тобто теж є зона
steering
захисту
committee
фондів,
from donors,
контролю, щоб це було
and
проведено
there is oversight on the part of donors.
Фонд ліквідації наслідків збройної агресії, він передбачає
One for elimination of the consequences of the
використання
armed
нового
aggression
DREAM, створений в Україні.
is based on the use of DREAM tool, Digital Restoration Ecosystem for Accountable Management tool. This tool gives the communities the opportunity to track the funding and how it is dispersed, but the civil and military administrations prioritize the projects, and later on the cabinet of ministers decide on where the funding should be allocated to. Unfortunately, the martial law, these funds are not vastly available to our communities, and this fund cannot cover 100% of needs in development
На національному
region.
рівні є ще такі додаткові інструменти,
At the
які можна
national level, there are also some additional tools that can be used by the communities to get more funding, such as revolving funds. This is the main tool when it comes to getting help for the associations of multi-apartment building owners, as well as municipalities, to get more funding for housing and accommodation and energy sector, energy efficiency. ESCO mechanism also does that when these companies commit to all the risks when implementing energy efficiency programs and heating modernization systems. It requires more detailed analysis, especially for the countries where there are issues that have to do with the legal protection of the partners, protection, especially talking about public-private partnership, about how losses of municipal property also impact the business that will be implemented in implementation of this projects, or also work with public institutions and business. This is a very interesting tool, but at the moment there are more risks than benefits. And also national credit programs of our national banks. Ukr-Exim Bank, Oshad Bank, for example, as they have sub-credit programs with the help of the money that they're getting from the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. Well, the thing about national credit programs is that national currency is used. The red tape and all of the bureaucracy is clearer for Ukrainians. But the downside is that national banks have a pretty short period of returning the loan money and a pretty high interest rate compared to foreign or international banks. As Ukraine relies a lot on the assistance and aid coming from our international partners, and here are the largest institutions that are assisting us, such as the World Bank, EBRD, EIB, and NAFCO, as a facility that is funding green projects. We analyzed their operations in Ukraine, and basically starting in 2022, all of them have established special programs for Ukraine that have to do with overcoming the challenges that pertain to war, to martial law, and green restoration. And at the same time, NAFCO only focuses on environmentally safe projects. And World Bank, for example, works more at the national level, at the state level. Some programs are focused on working with communities, but again, that is done through the national level. So International Financial Corporation, for example, in Lviv, helped to change the healthcare facility so that it can be used by IDPs. EBRD also has experience of working with green cities, and they are working with them. But it mostly works with large oblast centers and has certain programs that are aimed at supporting national banks to provide loans for municipalities and local business in the war context. EIB has programs that were founded for Ukraine National Credit Program, the Program for Ukraine's Restoration, that were founded before 2022. Due to the armed hostilities in the territory of Donetsk and Luhansk Oblast, as well as Crimean Peninsula, starting 2014. However, all of these processes go through the Ministry of Reconstruction. They do not work with the communities directly. And NAFCO seems to be the most accessible, the easiest to understand institution for the direct collaboration with our municipalities. At the same time, there is a big need in technical assistance so that Ukrainian communities, regional authorities, state bodies could improve their operation, harmonize it with how it is done in Europe, so that we can also cope with all the challenges. Therefore, there are USAID programs such as Dobra and Hoverla. They are working with their communities and they're showing good examples of how funding can be attracted for those communities. GIZ, You Lead with Europe, that is supporting communities, as well as UNDP, that is working on capacity building, organizing trainings on how to apply for different donor assistance, and are attracting additional funding. I would specifically like to highlight that You Lead with Europe helps communities a lot, especially when it comes to decentralization. And they have been doing that starting 2020, when 469 communities were created, and each of the regional branches were leading our communities on this pathway so that they would learn from our international partners. And they also have a pretty good program, Bridges of Trust, that helps to build bridges with the communities in the EU. And what is the most accessible for our communities is probably the most realistic and basically allows our communities to be as engaged as possible. However, it's really hard to measure how much of humanitarian aid was provided. The International Migration Organization, ADRA, People in Need, ICRC, those who approach the communities on their own, starting the first days of the full-scale invasion, who organize an assistance and aid for IDPs, providing them with hygiene, food, and for example, International Migration Organization also organized training for people so that they could find jobs following their displacement. And this is also a very important technical assistance, I would say. Aside from humanitarian missions, international institutions, international aid and support, many governments are also providing aid and assistance to our government. And multiple countries also are picking one of the affected regions in Ukraine and are working on it in a focused way, such as Denmark, Lithuania. And here you can see the data from the Kiel Institute for World Economy, the tracker, Ukraine support tracker, and it is on the map, depending on the share of the aid provided to Ukraine and then the ratio of the percentage to their GDP. For example, the US, Canada, European countries are providing a lot of assistance and aid. And in comparison to their GDP, a lot of assistance was also provided by the Baltic states and Scandinavian countries. The Vikings basically showed their true nature when fighting the evil. And how does it all happen, the funding? How do you access the finance? Which institutions are engaged and involved in that? We try to show it in a format of a scheme. And I would like to tell our audience, if you see that we missed something, we're very open. Please let us know about that, because we want to improve it. And what did we see? So if we look at the priorities of reconstruction on the slide, and it's at the top of the slide, basically for the communities that the most accessible, the humanitarian aid, the humanitarian of sister cities in other countries, the grants from the civil society organizations, international technical assistance projects that also form a component of the credit aid and assistance from various financial institutions. Also, assistance from the international financial organizations that is provided indirectly through the government and national banks, as well as international government support. And basically, all of these processes, they are pretty clear and logical. If you spend some time on figuring it out, you can understand what we should focus more on so that communities can strengthen their capacity with the help of our international partners. And basically, when talking to our colleagues, we realize that when a community is operating their internal resources, Of course, here we're talking about the budget revenue, land, people, human resources, the human capital that is capable of producing ideas, implementing projects, turning them into life. And the war demonstrated that a human resource is extremely valuable for Ukraine, not only for the defense of Ukraine, but also for building the proper backline. And what you see at the circle in the middle of the scheme is what is happening in the communities. And this can help us overcome all of the challenges that local self-government bodies are faced with, as well as people who reside in the communities. And for us to get out of this circle that's in the middle, to get to the square that surrounds it, to get additional funding from the national funds, from the EU programs that are available to us due to our EU advancement, international assistance programs, ASCO mechanism and grants, all of that requires certain steps to be taken by our communities so that we can get into this outer square out of the inner circle. And this is the analogy of the cash flow, the rat race tabletop game. When people are trying to get to the outer square of financial independence, financial stability, and resilience. So we try to visualize it in a way that it looks like that game. And we are trying to bring the local communities to this outer square so that we can provide for their financial stability and resilience. And to implement this transition, we have also outlined a set of steps or benchmarks, checkpoints, if you want, the measures that need to be implemented by the communities, as well as national government and local authorities to together overcome all of the challenges to rebuild the communities of all this country in general. First and foremost, the community needs to do self-analysis, mobilize and effectively use inner resources, and think about how they can be attracted additional. And here I would like to focus on one thing that our external partners are focusing on a lot. Ukrainian monitoring projects also have been highlighting it on multiple occasions when we're talking about how the money is used. This is so-called absorption capacity. If we have representatives of communities, we all know that we have some residue, but this is a huge disadvantage for us, for the communities, when working with the donors, because this demonstrates that we do not know how to use the available resource. What we have done, what the state has provided in the form of subventions and dotations, it means that you do not know what to effectively do with your money. So why do you want to attract additional money on top of that? That is why we have to review and reconsider financial supports to use in our internal budget so that we do not have a lot of unused money left, because this also damages our image before other people. And the second one, it is very important to improve collaboration with civil society organizations. Not every donor works with state bodies because the procedures for procurement are pretty red tape and complicated. So if a local authority has very amazing collaboration with the civil society organizations, in partnership with them, we can attract additional resources to resolve some of the problems that have to do with energy efficiency or assistance for IDPs or for children, etc. Another important thing is building capacity of the local authorities. So we're talking about project management, financial management, knowing how to use the funding available to us. It is very important to also improve communication in partnership with regional authorities. Now we have 1,470 communities. Many of them are under occupation. Some have been deoccupied. The communities find themselves in a situation when they have to compete with one another to attract additional funding. And we understand that this funding is limited. That is why, in this case, a lot is placed on regional authorities, regional development agencies, so that in every region we can see on a territory which community you can engage certain resource, attract certain resource that will be helpful for all the communities in a specific region. Also, At the regional level, there is a lot of assistance to small rural communities that do not have enough human resource and apply for different projects. That is why regions are the one that you go to for the development to be more balanced out. Because, say, three communities, one built waste processing facilities, then you have to go to the regional level. They will be the ones coordinating this aspiration. The first step is using Dream platform for the communities. Using this mechanism, you can apply for different projects using your own personal page. This will help you to better apply for the projects. It can also let you track how you're implementing it, which funding was attracted for that. And the next one, the state's support of communities in using additional financial resources. Some steps have been taken. At the end of 2023, there were some amendments made to loans given to communities because in the budget code it was mentioned that only city councils can access credits. Now, the communities, both rural councils and village councils can do that too. So you can improve the mechanisms of accessing loans. Also, participating in funding programs by international financial institutions is very important. That's why communities have to unite their efforts. Because if we're talking about a large development, international banks, they are not interested in projects that have communities with 27,000 people living in them. They want larger projects that would cover several communities at the same time. And this is why we should work on uniting, to work on improving collaboration between communities, to work on clusterization, and this can also help us work with donors. Providing communities to the status of legal entity. This is also something that is mentioned in the Ukraine plan in the framework of Ukraine facility. This will help the banks to work with the community as a single legal entity, because now we have municipal enterprises, the councils all have separate bank accounts, and it is complicated. Lots of clients, and when you have one legal entity for the community, it simplifies and streamlines the procedure of working with the donor. And another extremely important thing for organizing the civil society, the local government bodies, the lawmakers is lobbying access, the direct access without any intermediaries to work with development banks. Well, this is it for me for now. And here are these three parts of our research. Please scan the QR code, please read them. We have only so far translated the first one, but we're promising to translate all of them. Thank you. Thank you so much, Maria. A lot of work has been put into that, and your experience of working in Brzezinski community also contributed a lot. I would like to mention that the roadmap on the last slide is simplified, and each of the recommendations you can find more detailed information for each of the levels and decision makers at all the levels. So we're encouraging you to go look at the event. Okay, I suggest we move on, and now I would like to give the floor to the representatives of the team with whom we started this. And we're going to give the floor to Alexei Stupnitsky and Mr. Ivan Shwes with the Ukrainian School of International Innovative Entrepreneurship, Law and Communication at Taras Shevchenko National University. And sometimes you have to translate from academic language to human language. And therefore, I'd like to give the floor to Alexei.
Мені зупинитися на питаннях, пов'язаних з
Thank you for giving me the floor. And now let me elaborate on the details on pilot surveys and interviews that we have prepared within this study. This study was called the Reconstruction of Ukraine Financial Tools for the recovery and reconstruction. This study was conducted in 2023. Speaking of methodology for the study, it was based on the analysis of the legal framework that is related to the recovery and reconstruction of Ukraine. Apart from that, we took into consideration the outputs of numerous discussions and roundtables on reconstruction and recovery of Ukraine, in which we participated. We also took into consideration expenditures and revenues of the local budget. So we have analyzed the main budget items and the sources of funding. What did we get as a result? We were able to analyze the tools of financing and their efficiency and efficacy. We were also able to outline the main risks. Based on those inputs, we were able to analyze the mechanisms for financial aid to be provided to the communities. We also came up with recommendations to the communities. Those recommendations were also based on the availability of financial resources, the timelines, and the key actors. Therefore, we prepared a roadmap. Of course, you can take a closer look at this study yourselves. It is available on the Bankwatch website, and it is also available on the website of our business school. But not to take too much time, I would like to draw your attention to the pilot surveys results and also the challenges that we had to address while carrying out those surveys and while we held focus groups. While conducting the surveys and interviews, we outlined the key questions and key issues that are of highest concerns to the communities. In general, I would like to underscore the following. Due to the sensitivity of reconstruction and recovery issues, most local leaders and representatives of local governments were not that willing to disclose information since they are dependent on the national government. These governmental officials were able to share their information only upon the condition of confidentiality. And it made it more difficult to standardize the responses. On the other hand, there was a risk of bias in the sample. Anyway, the results that were and conclusions that were drawn after this study were focused on the following issues. Let's analyze those issues and let's dive deeper into this city of the communities. Issue number one that was mentioned by all the respondents. It is the reform of decentralization. Since the reform of decentralization did not provide broader powers to the local level in the part of local taxes and levies, the lack of funding at the local level is covered up by the local donations from legal entities, from local philanthropists, citizens. It means that they do not have the means to cover this gap in the budget. And they also use grants sometimes, but they do not have access to loans. They do not have also access to the international loans, not to mention the securities and bonds that could have been issued also at the local level and could have been of great assistance in terms of the project of reconstruction and recovery. When it comes to rural communities, they do not have permission to access the loan programs at all under the law. The municipal governments see the procedure rather complicated. The procedure of coordination of their efforts very complicated, as there are few more levels to go through: the regional level, the national level, and the fact that the national level and the regional level make the decisions for the local communities causes some resistance and reluctance from the local level. Just let's take a look at this fact. The local budget is of the biggest interest to the local government officials, but at the same time, the taxation lies within the responsibility of the National Tax Service of Ukraine. Therefore, how can they work under such conditions when they do not have access to the taxes? Another issue is the red tape of the process of reconstruction and recovery. Starting June 2023, a number of government offices has been established. For instance, there is the Deputy Minister on Restoration, Deputy Chief of the Department on Reconstruction at the local level. There are officials who are in charge of some actions. But what is actually happening? That is the filtering of the requests coming from the communities. The regional level has to give a green light to the requests from the local government, and then it goes up only. And all that contributes to more corrupt practices. The kickbacks coming to the fore. And one more issue to mention, there is a negative trend when it comes to municipalities. The civil military administrations of the regional level are also established at smaller communities, and they are established anywhere these days. Military administrations assume the powers of the communities, especially when it comes to the budget and also the administration of utilities sector and even transport sector. There are multiple cases of conflicts between the heads of the communities and the presidential office. And the end of such conflicts is usually the dismissal of the head of the local community. This approach is not aligned with the European principles and expectations of the European Parliament. The communities are not able to act on their own since they are under constant pressure. There is the society organization that is called Ukrainian Facility Platform. It has been established by our colleagues, and it is aimed at doing the groundwork for the cooperation between Ukrainian businesses and Ukrainian governmental officials. When we tell about these initiatives to our European colleagues, they do not understand why we need such efforts at all. Another issue to mention is the lack of proper discussion at the local level. There is no priority setting for the development at the local level. It means that some questions remain unanswered.
Шукаємо на основі, коли були зустрічі,
These questions
чи виправдане
pertain
є
to the
сьогодні
following.
завдання міністерства
Is it
адміністрації
justified
щодо
to
цих повноважень
establish a mega ministry
чи не
and
призведе
to have all the powers
до
within that
розвитку
ministry when
економіки,
it comes to
до
restoration?
сплеску корупції у цій сфері?
Another question
І тому
is
ми говоримо вже про
the
легітимацію.
concerns about the
Чи
possible
зможуть нам
rise
підтримати
in
це питання?
corruption
Територіальні
related
громади
to the
розраховують, що
reconstruction
обласні
projects.
державні адміністрації будуть об'єктивно
The
враховувати
oblast
ці потреби.
administrations have to take into consideration the needs of the local communities in unbiased manner. And then the national budget should to be used to disperse funds, but that does not happen in a transparent manner. We see that the majority of business people and local government officials are supportive of reconstruction efforts, but they want to be able to disperse the funds at the local level without the permissions being given at the central level. And we see that this is the effort that is very difficult to achieve. Another issue I want to mention is the lack of proper financial tools when it comes to target investment projects. We have heard a very interesting presentation right now with the disaggregation of the programs from the Ministry of Infrastructure. We heard about the State Fund for Regional Development. We heard about the UNDP and the USAID. But at the same time, we need the tools. We need the financial tools that have to be clearly set and explained. Pre-accession instruments are required. With the help of these instruments, the international donors will be able to support the candidate country. In our study, we concluded that there might be a need to establish the pre-accession fund that will be in charge of the investment project. In our business school and in my personal experience, I see the utmost importance of the investment projects for the local communities. In Ukraine, unfortunately, people who are in charge of the projects of the investment projects do not know about the requirements from IFIs. They just prepare the feasibility study, and that's it. But they raise a number of requirements and procedures that you have to comply with while preparing your investment project proposals and while actually putting into practice and implementing those projects. There is a need to have the group to prepare the projects, and these groups have to be established at the local level, as that will help in terms of cooperating and coordinating our efforts. That is crucial for the decentralization reform as well, as we want this reform to develop and not just to be something put on paper but not into practice. And to wind up, I would like to share my opinion on the recovery and reconstruction of Ukraine. If our future and the future of our communities depend on business climate in Ukraine, we have to take into due consideration the rule of law. Our Western investors do not have the certainty when it comes to our ability to change. Are we ready not only to defend the country, but also are we ready to change inside? Are we ready to curb the corrupt practices? Are we ready to eliminate kickbacks? Are we ready to change the judiciary?
Сумасшедший резонанс. Диссонанс.
There is this discord between Ukrainians, the grassroots who are working and donating to the army. And there is this Soviet machine of the government and public administration. And we see the discrepancy between those two. This discrepancy, unfortunately, is becoming crucial and critical. Especially, we can see that in the past 2 years. You know, Ronald Reagan in 1987 talked to Gorbachev in Berlin. He said, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. Well, I'm not trying to take the laws of Ronald Reagan, but at the same time, I know that we have some colleagues from international organizations here today, and I would like to urge you to help us ASAP to dismantle this corrupt pyramid of the judiciary. That is a hurdle for our EU accession. Without that being dismantled and eliminated, we will not be able to move on. Thank you, Alexei, for bringing that up. Yes, indeed, it is of utmost importance. We hope that we will be able to tell our international partners about that, and we hope that your statements will be heard. If there are any comments or questions, we will take them now. I see that we have 2 questions in Q&A chat, and probably those questions were addressed to Maria, but maybe there are some questions that could be addressed also to Alexei and Ivan. The first question is pertaining to the ecosystems of financing of the reconstruction. Have you ever considered the option of bonds provided by diaspora? And what is the role of the Iran military administrations? And another question is, have you looked into the risks of misappropriation of funds under different models of financing? How could this misappropriation be prevented?
Якраз регіональні або обласні військові
Most
адміністрації.
of the tasks are the ones that are implemented by the military administrations or local administrations, and the decisions at the regional and region levels is something they're responsible for. Talking about diaspora funds, it is a very interesting issue. I haven't covered it, but probably in the upcoming studies and publications, we will take a look at it too. But yes, this is a good idea. Thank you so much for giving us that hint. And how we studied the proper use of funds in our publications, you can find information about the risks of certain political influence that pertain to the lack of integrity. But we didn't do a very detailed analysis of the risks additionally. Thank you. Maybe someone else from the speakers would like to react. I think that in Alexei's presentation, there was also something that covered the question that were just asked. Therefore, shall we move on? Maybe the next speaker should be Bogdan Kalichavy, the head of the International Cooperation at Ukraine Association of Territorial Communities. At the same time, he is the head of Kopychinski City Council, but sadly he had to leave us sooner. So the next speaker is Alexander Karpenko, the head of the Agency of Regional Development in Chortkiev City Council. He has a vast experience in working with the local government, public sector, project management, economic monitoring, and of course, he is now using all of his skill in his community. So over to you, Alexander. I hope everyone can hear and see me well. Greetings, colleagues. I suggest we share our experience, a pretty specific one that pertains specifically to the green energy, and tell you how did it happen so that we ended up being in the center of this storm, in a good sense, of course. And then, if I may, I would like to start sharing my screen. Here's my presentation. Can you please confirm me whether you can see it and whether it's full screen or not? How about now? Yes. So you can see our team on this picture, our city council's team. What are we going to start with? Let's go back, rewind to 2022. In 2022, April, everyone was in a pretty challenging situation. To a different extent, of course. Some people even ended up in other towns and cities. I ended up in Chortkiev, and I was invited there to look for the additional funding. And I've been working for 10 plus years in management and green energy. Therefore, this line of work was the most relevant for me, and we also were preparing for the heating season. We knew that the tax and challenge were coming, so we had to do something about it back then. Therefore, the issue of looking for some facilities came up because it was pretty chaotic. Some people left Chortkiev, some people moved to Chortkiev. So we couldn't really talk about any institutional consistency. We had to build our team from scratch, and now it is more or less stable. And we do have some institutional memory. It's better now. So I have also mentioned some of my foreign colleagues and partners. I was introduced to one Swiss company. It is the biggest distributor of solar panels in Switzerland. And negotiations lasted for pretty long, but we wanted to do it ASAP, as soon as possible. We needed the context of the Europeans, because back then, the EU was slower. You need to explain everything, tell who we are, what is our background, what do we want, and on what conditions we want this to be implemented. As a result of this negotiation, we agreed that we're gonna get a little bit of equipment, as you can see in the picture, 56 solar panels, and we promised that we will report, that we will mention them on all possible web pages and platforms. And when we were talking to our Swiss partners, they said, okay, you managed to talk us into that, but will you be able to get the results and save? And they said, okay, we understand that you might not even contact us after that, but you know, we walk the talk. We are reliable partners. That is why we installed it all on the hospital rooftop. And as you can see, at the end of 2023, we managed to save the amount of money that was used to install it. So we don't have to pay the money for this energy, so we partially are covering it with the help of this solar power plant. But this was the first project, a pilot one. And it allowed us to probably be more bold, communicate about it with the donors, and do even more stuff. But I'll elaborate on that later. Another project that was even more interested in terms of engaging people, because oftentimes people are asking, is it possible to engage different donors to work with a certain facility? Because, you know, they all want only one donor to be emphasized? Do they keep in touch or do they fight with one another? So here's an example that demonstrates that if you build communication in a proper way, everyone is going to be friends with each other. All of your partners are going to be friends. Why? Because I brought together different stakeholders. For example, this is a rehabilitation center for the kids, and there were quite a few challenges with energy efficiency. So we created an energy certificate to understand in which direction we should be headed to improve the situation. But install solar panels for this facility, we had to develop a proper analysis. So we had to analyze it and work in terms of reference. Any private company could do that in Ukraine, but we were not happy with that. So I contacted the national lab at the Ministry of Energy of the United States of America. They recently started working with the communities, and currently they are collaborating with 4 communities. But they do not give you the names of the communities that they are working with. So maybe we will learn who else they worked with at a later stage, aside from us. So they did the feasibility study for the accumulators and batteries that we needed. And the pretty interesting thing that the inverter and this thing will be given to us by China. And we thought, well, there's China and the US. When it comes to communication, is it okay that it's the US and China involved in this? And of course, because we are making a contribution to the Ukrainian cities, something useful. So this basically answers this question. Aside from that, we managed to also raise 3,000 euros, which will be used to install the solar panels and batteries. And there is a third European partner engaged, a company that works with smart energy called SmartN. So you can and you should engage more donors, build your communication properly so that everyone can win from it and so that it is as transparent as possible. So here you can find more information. We already have the feasibility study. We have the energy certificate. We got the equipment that will be installed in 2024. And some further steps. We will keep looking for funding to install new windows because the old ones are not energy efficient for heat insulation, ventilation, and as kids stay at that center, oftentimes when we're working on projects, we forget about microclimate inside the buildings. People forget about ventilation, and also there are no systems to control the atmospheric pressure, CO2, and humidity inside the buildings, and we want to do that. And also some information about the solar power plant. It is pretty small, 6 kilowatts, but it allows to cover 78% of the power needs. And the batteries allow to work the center autonomously without any connection to the power grid for almost 48 hours. And now let us take a look at our overarching vision. We hope that it is going to be the first project in Ukraine when the city is not simply getting a certain number of solar panels and installs a small station, installs some pumps, install something at the healthcare facility, and this is it. That is why for us, we're thinking in the long run. In the Cherkiv is one of the first cities in Ukraine that signed a memorandum with the international organization in 2018 with a few other cities, including Kamenets-Podilsky, and then we've also joined us. And we have declared that by 2050, we will move to 100% of renewable energy sources in our community. This memorandum was signed with the organization 350.org, and now we're focusing on critical infrastructure. And we're talking about over 10 different facilities. We have almost 1,000 solar panels. Now we need to find funding to install them, to launch them, and to maintain them. But again, I'd like to reiterate one more time. This is something that we're responsible for as the community who is the recipient. And this is how you're supposed to work with donors and partners. And you can see that we will be able to cut the cost by 20 to 36%, depending on the type of the facility. And 7 million, when we're going to reach this number, when we install almost 8 million can be reinvested into energy efficiency measures in all of these facilities. And we are starting to see new horizons and new prospects for the local economy and for the communities. We understand that we have two projects. We got the grant from IP for 500 million, and the solar panels of the Swiss company that believed in us after this first small pilot project, because our story is the story about a long-term work. And we got a 500,000 euros grant, and we're thinking about having some flocks of sheep so that we do not have to waste money on fuel to cut the grass. We have to cut it because of the requirement for any solar station that is located on the ground to avoid any fires, etc. So this way we are gonna resolve the problem with both grass and wastewater treatment facilities. And maybe we'll plant some berries too, but of course we have to separate them from the sheep somehow. And you know that is pretty widespread. They have it in Greece and Spain and Italy. There are only a couple of commercial examples, but I hope that the communities are gonna do more and more of it. And here you can see the summary of what has to do with energy sectors. So we are getting equipment from German companies. We also won the bidding procedure, and you know, we are going to work with the sister city Karlskrona in Sweden. We got the money from them so that for both our cities they can develop the concepts for heating, switching to the green energy in this domain. And I have mentioned the formula of success. This is our conclusion following 2 years of our operations, understanding the missions that are not only yours, but also understanding the needs of the donors, understanding the needs of the sister towns and cities, be more empathetic, because, you know, sometimes we kept asking and asking, and some of the sister cities, they simply cut this communication. But this is not bad. You just have to reconsider your approaches. This is our homework, basically. With the majority, we have joint grants, projects, and initiatives, and they are interested in that. And of course, it is a win-win for both. Also, joint activities also improves horizontal ties and connections. And of course, you have to be responsible, transparent. You need to know how to report properly. You have to express your gratitude, because everyone likes the words of gratitude, no matter what they say. And of course, we are working with the various programs, and we're waiting for the live to be launched soon. We have also mentioned to see the Urbach 3 project that has already been implemented. One exchange experience was the Belgian city that managed to also change former industrial area and turn that into social housing. Also, we're working with Swiss and German companies, and today we have representatives of 7 communities from Ochterka and others. We're always encouraging them to resort to associations and unions, because there is the Association of Cities and Towns of Ukraine or Association of Territorial Communities, and this gives you an immense support. When you're part of some platform, you get tremendous support. When you have the access to the mic, so to say, and it is very important when you are not doing that alone, but rather in a team. Well, this is it from my side. Thank you for the opportunity to join you one more time. And if there are any questions, I'll be happy to take them. Please let me know. Okay, thank you very much. There is a question to you about working with the wastewater treatment facilities and who is gonna maintain the inverters, the accumulators, because we know that developing a product is one thing, but then you have to maintain all of it, all of these facilities, need additional funding for that. This is a good question. You know, this is also a certain trend that we keep seeing. And I don't want to give you any spoilers, but many communities are also working with the wind power. It is seen as something more of a commercial nature, but I think we should also learn from the European communities who are shareholders of cooperatives that have wind turbines. All of the communities that have received some help from Eco Action, Greenpeace, German associations, and different foundations, they all walk to different paths. When you have only one station, one facility, you can work with it on your own. Because the person who works with electricity can go through a training course that you only would pay 200 USD for, and they can also work with a different facility. But when you have 20 or 30 such facilities, then you can probably hire a private organization and do the outsource. For now, we only have one wastewater treatment facility, and therefore we can do that on our own. Because basically the utility companies will continue doing that too, and we do not need any additional funding for that. But if we're gonna install more solar power plants, then probably we'll have to also engage more organizations. Then again, it will all depend on the financial capacity. Thank you so much for your questions. Okay, here's a question to Alexei too. This is a very good, a very objective study. Is there any legal funding, legal foundation that will allow us to improve the work at the level of communities, or maybe some amendments are planned? Well, the thing is that there are legal initiatives, but the thing is, how will all of that be processed in the parliament? This is the challenge. Why is that? Because in the portfolio, there are some very interesting suggestions regarding local communities. And we took it all into account, and I'll be honest with you. These are very useful things. But another question is how all of that is being implemented and how fast all of that is being processed by the Parliament of Ukraine. How fast they are processing of these legal initiatives. Because maybe it could be united in a package. We also need the audit of Western companies to see how efficient they were when it came to the legal initiative. But there is one main question. How will the parliament process it all? Say, if they will say that this is not of essence at the moment, it's going to slow down. And it, in its turn, will clearly slow down everything that has to do with communities. Not about the communities. I understand that communities are dependent on funding schools, kindergartens, getting the money from Oblast and from the national government. But if you develop the budget structure in a different way, we were talking to the representatives, the experts in this domain, especially when it comes to the EU. And we're talking about how they developed all of that in Germany. They have their own initiatives, which basically are given independence to the local government authorities. And they, for example, there is a standard way of paying the national tax and local tax. There are standard approaches to how to do all of that, delineated, how to frame the taxation structure to make budgets more efficient. And the suggestions can be found in the report. Thank you. Thank you. And then I think we can also share the link to this report
так
And I
розумію.
think Ivan also would like to quickly comment, right? Yes, I'll try to be very, very quick because Alexei made a pretty broad comment. We should keep in mind that every time we are getting some loan, very important is the grant component. And the grant component provided by international financial institution covers everything that has to do with preparing all of the documentation to apply for this loan. And the municipal authorities have to be more active, and they have to directly collaborate with international financial institutions so that they can use grants in the most efficient way. Thank you.
Пропоную рухатися далі. У нас
Thank you. And now I suggest to proceed with our agenda. We have our next speaker, and this is Andrei Mazo, who is a representative of SIGREEN Organization Center of Civic Initiatives. He will tell us more about the support provided to the communities in terms of the access to financing. His organization is running trainings for the local governments, and those trainings are dedicated to transparency, anti-corruption efforts, and accountability. The organization is also part of the community integrity program and initiative. Over to you, Andrei. Greetings, everyone. Well, I do not like talking for hours, so therefore I would like just to outline the most important issues that could be used as takeaways. I actually enjoyed the question from Alexei. Are we going to change or not? I actually have a question to myself and to the representatives of civil society and to our partners. Are we going to change or not? That was the question that we had to find answer to a long time ago. We do need to revive our communities and territories, and I agree with Alexei that we should move into a slightly different direction. Another thing to consider is whether we are ready for this kind of renewal and revival. Besides, we need to take into due consideration the wishes of our donors and the international organizations. From my point of view, reconstruction means repairment of something that is broken or something that is damaged. Is that actually what we want? No, I don't think so. If we are talking about recovery, not reconstruction, recovery of the infrastructural sites. Well, I still have a question regarding to that. Are we sure that our enemy will not strike those sites of critical infrastructure in the future? And for businesses, there is still a risk if they want to come back to the communities that are not that safe today. We understand that if the reconstruction and recovery is possible, these actions have to take place mostly in eastern and northern territories. We understand that the rules of reconstruction are not guided by some global guidelines. I understand that the reconstruction and recovery of the territories should be viewed from the point of view of the paradigm of thinking of the citizens who reside in these territories. We need to create this new community that would be based on the ideas of transparency, inclusion, and public participation. But we need to prepare the citizens on our side. And here comes another question. Are the communities and territories ready for this reconstruction and recovery processes? As we could proceed in different directions. We could prepare a number of recommendations. We could draft the best guidelines and orders and then offer them to the communities and actually make them obligatory to follow. But there is another way. We could talk to the representatives of the civil society. We could encourage discussions, and this approach could be from top to bottom, from the bottom to the top. And I believe that we are all on the same page here, that the second option is the one to go with. But here comes another issue, the capacity of the local governments. Are they ready to be the drivers of these changes? Are they ready to assume the responsibility for what will take place in their communities throughout the processes of reconstruction and recovery and after those processes? So Green Organization often conducts surveys among the representatives of civil society organizations, and those surveys usually pertain to the needs. Now, I would like to share the results of one of our recent surveys with over 200 respondents from all the regions of Ukraine. The respondents were people who work in the local authorities or who represent the civil society organization. Over 60% of the respondents said that there is an issue with the lack of human resources at the local level, and there is the lack of experts. This was the biggest issue mentioned at the local level. The second biggest issue was the lack of funding and lack of communication with the donors. Another question that we asked was, what are the problems for the civil society organizations? And here we heard the following: the a poor awareness about the civic rights of the citizens. Over 50% said so, and 30% said that they are not properly engaged into the processes. The citizens and society is not properly engaged into the processes that take place in their communities. And these are the surveys that were conducted also in 2024. And the biggest issues that were mentioned was the lack of experts in project management and the flaws in the work with donors. I do have questions when it comes to the work with the communities and their capacity. I doubt that they have 100% capacity to be fully on board with the process of reconstruction and recovery, especially when it comes to the communities that are located close to the front line. But that doesn't mean that we have to stop. No, on the contrary, we have to pay attention to these communities and we have to pay attention to these processes. Actually, these results of the surveys prompt us with a possible solution. We need to educate and to prepare the communities for the reconstruction process. At the moment, there is a window of opportunity for the communities in Ukraine, and we need to tap into this opportunity and let them seize this opportunity. But that is only possible if there is proper cooperation. That cooperation means the cooperation with the international partners, but also cooperation at the local level with the local authorities and the cooperation with the regional and central authorities. And of course, there should be proper cooperation and coordination with the citizens and civil society, as that would help in terms of finding the proper capacity. In our organization, apart from training programs, we have the initiatives for the communication opportunities to be provided to the civil society representatives and governmental officials, as well as international donors. There is another question that we keep on asking all the time. What do the donors want? They actually wanted to see some specific actions. They do not want to invest into pretty pictures. They are not interested in construction of kindergartens that will remain without children. They are not interested in uh, investing in building of big stadiums that will be out of use. Now, let me give you an example. In 2022, you mentioned the coalition actually. In 2022, jointly with a number of other communities, we established the police of communities with integrity. Maybe you remember that there were some articles about the humanitarian aid being embezzled in Ukraine. There were some pieces of news about that, claiming that the humanitarian aid never reached its beneficiaries. In reality, that was the information disseminated by Russia, but we actually had to take action back then. Therefore, we formed a coalition of the communities with the purpose of debunking this disinformation coming from Russia. Twice a month, we were reporting about the disbursement of the aid that was transferred to us. Therefore, communities felt more confident, but they were able to use this platform as an opportunity to talk to their partners. As now they were seen as the partners who are open to communication, who are transparent, and who are frank about their actions. One of the members of this coalition is a community that is ready to take on board all the projects available. The international community is ready to finance those who are ready to work in a transparent and accountable way. The communities that work in such a way will be prosperous and successful in the nearest future. Unfortunately, we are not able to give 100% of powers to the local level. There should be some oversight from the central level, and there should be interaction and cooperation. At the same time, this oversight from the central and regional level should not be based on the mandatory actions and the mandatory measures only. I actually would like to use the term revival or renewal and not reconstruction. And I hope that we will be able to conduct this process in such a way that would be beneficial for all the sides. And I hope that we will be able to seize this opportunity.
У нас з'явилися
Thank you
такі
very
питання
much.
в
We
чаті.
have a number of questions in the chat box.
Пана Андрія. Це, мабуть, зараз
There is a
після
question
доповіді. Чи є
to
плани систематично розвивати
Andriy.
позиції доброчесних громад?
Do you have any plans on developing the coalition of communities with integrity, maybe from the point of view of reconstruction and recovery of Ukraine? Yes, we do have the plans to make this coalition grow. Now we are working on our future actions. Well, I do not want to disclose all the secrets now, since we still have some projects in the making. But at the same time, give you a glimpse. We are now working on transparency, accountability, and anti-corruption efforts. As Alexei mentioned in his intervention, we need to eradicate corruption at all levels possible. Therefore, in our coalition, we will focus on that. We wanted to be presented as the communities with zero tolerance to corruption. And there was another question to Mr. Alexander. You mentioned the partners and importance of understanding partners. Could you share your secret? How were you able to get them interested in Ukraine? Well, actually, I was sharing that secret for 15 minutes almost, but okay, let me reiterate. In order to become of interest to partners, you have to have some reason to it, to your project. For instance, Drogovic, everyone knows what Drogovic is famous for instance, for its salt. And what about Kapuscinski? And there was Mr. Bogdan over here from the community of Kapuscinski, and he was presenting partners with sausages that were branded with his business cards. Actually, that works. Zhytomyr, Kamenets-Podilsky, and Chernihiv were in the center of attention of the business partners at the beginning, but now we joined also the Energy Cities Association, and this is the European Association on Energy Efficient Cities. We were the first Ukrainian community to join. It gives us certain advantages, not from the point of view of marketing yourself. No, it is a sign to the donors that you act in a transparent way and that you are a responsible, reliable partner. We need to learn in terms of grant funds, and there is the whole culture behind that. As we proceed, we will be on the same page with our European partners. Thank you.
Дякую. Ми, в принципі, гарно йдемо по часу.
Thank you very much.
Наразі в мене є ще одна колега, яка би хотіла, яку
Then
я хотіла
now
запросити
I
до
actually
свого
have
виступу. Я бачу,
time
Богдан,
to
тому це
give the
Бенк, що
floor
він
to
є
Fidanka from Bankwatch.
по роботі міста
Fidanka
Бенк,
Bacheva-Magra is a leader of strategic area working with cities in Bankwatch. Of course, we were using her advice while working on this study. Fidanka, could you tell us more about your experience of working with donors? What should be offered to them? Do you have anything to give us tips on?
Доброго дня всім. Can you hear me well? I will speak English, so please enable translation. I want to thank the organizers for this event and also for all the participants who joined us today. And let me also congratulate the authors of this immense research and for sharing their takeaways today. For all the speakers, I should say that it is really now the right time to present this research and findings and recommendations and to have this discussion. It's the right time to have this discussion both in Ukraine, but also with international financial institutions and international partners of Ukraine. Because for the first 2 years, the mode of operation at the international community was very much emergency support, trying to mobilize money, and provide what they called war insurance or guarantees for the investments. So in 2022 and 2023, indeed, it was more like work it out as you go. We know that a lot of the financial mechanisms were not there. So what financial institutions did is simply hand money, in many cases, hand money to the government to work out how to distribute. So, for example, the biggest support came from the World Bank, as the slides from Maria showed. And big part of that support was indeed for budget support and redistribution down. By now, the banks have already kind of got used to the situation, and I think there's pretty realistic assessment and expectations of the situation. We can see that also the financial flows are settling. For example, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, one of the biggest supporters of both public and private sector in Ukraine, recently in December 2023 received a capital increase of 4 billion, specifically dedicated to invest in Ukraine. So from 30 billion, the bank now has 34 billion, and it is focusing. I mean, Ukraine was always a big recipient, but now the focus on Ukraine is even more. So now that all these resources are being settled, the question is, how are they going to be spent exactly? In addition to this public budget support, there has been big focus also on the small and medium enterprises. That's something that goes through Ukrainian financial institutions, so private banks in Ukraine. And one other big focus that has been quite hard is the municipal services and municipal infrastructure. Indeed, from moving from emergency support now to more kind of systemic way of supporting, there have been a number of challenges identified, and I will say that we're in constant dialogue with the banks, and having this research that was presented today, as well as the input from all the speakers, is definitely helping BankWatch in our dialogue with the banks. Some of the issues that have been coming up and were also echoed today is about the having loans versus grants. To what is the loan absorption capacity of municipalities, and to what extent loans need to be paired up with grants to be really to have appetite for this kind of investments. Another issue that has been coming up in our conversations is about the scale of investment. You can imagine that when a bank has to spend 4 billion, they are reluctant to look into the 4 million investments because they need to look at kind of bigger scale options. And I think this was also echoed by some of the speakers about the need to group, the need to have those project preparation working groups and associations. And the last challenge that has been coming up in our conversations is about the currency of lending, because of currency fluctuations and insecurity with regards to returning some of those investments. So all of these issues seem to be important both for the international partners, financial institutions, as well as we hear today from this discussion at this webinar. And I want to go over some of the discussion points that I find very interesting for us to note. And to bring to Brussels, to London, to Washington, to decision makers there. First, Vlada kicked us off with the idea that reconstruction and renewal of Ukrainian communities need to happen following some principles. For example, there's a principle of sustainability, and this is nothing new. Generally, sustainability is very, very high on the agenda of all financial institutions. They have quotas that at least half of their investments have to be green. So I'd say this agenda is very much aligned with what is coming from Europe. Russia destroyed the infrastructure of the last century. Now there's no point of communities to rebuild that last century infrastructure. There's point for communities to rebuild the infrastructure of this century, which is renewable energy. And it's also great to see that there are already some models coming from the ground of exactly this kind of green sustainable investments that are also demonstrating that they're not just green, but also financially viable and suiting the needs of communities. Another principle that is very important to follow, that's the principle of participation. And I think several of the speakers spoke about the need to change ourselves, to adjust, to be able to participate in a transparent, accountable way. Some of the takeaway points that I noted, for example, from Oleksiy, he kind of outlined the big problems that need to be overcome. For example, with regards to red tape, the need to empower municipalities to have more power sharing between national level, regional level, local level, to develop financial tools that are suitable for the smaller municipalities, and the need to build capacity to prepare and implement proposals. So, for example, this idea of project preparation groups, I think this was very interesting and echoes points that were made by others as well. From Alexander's presentation, it's really, really great to see these kind of examples emerging. Because oftentimes what we really need is these kind of good practices that can be followed by others, or good models and examples, not just of technical solutions, because the technical solutions, I think, are there, but also with regards to how to build reliable partnerships. That's a really important takeaway, and really important for others to also learn from that example. It's important also to, as an example of how to build those avenues with international partners and supporters, avenues that others can also walk, learning from existing experience. And yeah, I really like that attitude that there are new horizons for local economies. And that's exactly also the idea that, we should rebuild Ukraine in the new century, not trying to replicate what was lost and what was destroyed. And looking for win-win win-win solutions. And yeah, I think all the presentations were building really nicely, covering all the important areas. And finally, Andriy Mazan's presentation was, sorry, my window keeps looking, about how this is a really good way to finish this session today, how we can take this opportunity not just to change our infrastructure and but also to change the way we cooperate from the bottom up, how to build capacity at the local level to ensure that this revival, I don't know, in translation it was using revival and renewal and reconstruction is happening in, again, according to the principles of participation, inclusion, and transparency. And indeed, it's very important to stress that this process cannot happen without empowering the the smaller players, the citizens, the civil society. It cannot be imposed, the solutions from the top. It has to really come from the bottom, and to come from the bottom, there needs to be the awareness and the capacity of citizens, civil society, experts, decision makers at the local level to change. And on the question, are we ready for the review? Obviously, it's not happening overnight, and we all need to be committed to make sure that this bottom up, investors, international partners, and top down and then bottom up will meet somewhere in the middle and will provide for the real needs of the municipalities. So thank you again for all these inputs. I'm very happy to see such positive and upbeat attitude to not just to survive and manage, but also to really develop and grow and learn and build Ukraine in a more just and sustainable way. Thanks again.
Thank you, Фі. Дуже дякую, Фіданко, за такі
Thank you so much, Fidanka. Thank you so much for such a summary and reflection about all the presentations that were made today. And I think that we spoke quite a few about the communities today, about how they collaborate with the donors. But we have less than 10 minutes left. And I would like to ask
таким питанням
panelists to also make some final comments to reflect about how you would answer the question. And maybe you could give 3 pieces of advice to the communities, to the national level, to our officials or donors. What advice you would give? Up to 3 advice. I'll go first. We talked a lot about communities, but I would also address the donors. Of course, we keep in touch with them a lot. And one of my pieces of advice would be to move closer to communities, to get out of their bubble and look for new avenues for the communities, because what we have been observing lately is mostly business as usual approach, and this needs to change. The second advice is also becoming more transparent on their side, because communication is a two-way process. And if we are requiring something from the communities, there should also be happening at the highest level, at the donor level, that will also assist the communities. And the third piece of advice is improving coordination and using standard approaches, because it is very hard for the community to understand the requirements of different donors. And I'm talking about both large and small donors that would have also facilitated. Maybe some other speakers would like to also quickly share. The floor is yours. Just unmute yourself. We have 7 minutes left. May I? I'll be brief. If we're talking about 3 things, well, the first one is collaboration. Don't be scared of uniting efforts and engaging everyone in the process, because oftentimes in Ukraine, the thing is that the local authorities, well, it is not even because they are not willing to communicate, but they do not understand that it can give you joint benefit. And that's why they don't keep in touch with their local people, even though it is a very important resource to engage. Second, constant communication, both internally as well as externally. We have to demonstrate, we don't have to only talk about how bad everything is. We should also show positive examples about how something is working properly. And for the donors, well, they shouldn't be scared of going to the grassroots level. They shouldn't be scared of talking to the people who will be using these resources directly. Communication with the government representatives, with the parliament representative is a cool thing. Nevertheless, you will learn about the challenges from the communities firsthand. So these are my suggestions. May I, Vlada? Sure, go ahead. Well, also, I'll try to be brief. First, the communities should in a positive way, be more aggressive. What do I mean by that? Say when local authorities or national bodies, when they were organizing public procurement, they were like, well, I can plan everything however I want, I can buy whatever I want. Now there are mandatory annual procurement plans, and if you want to do something that is outside of these plans, you need to introduce change to those plans. And I would suggest that the community should actively lobby having an annual plan of discussions with public, at least when it comes to infrastructure projects that are implemented using donor funds. I have experience of working with the EIB in Eastern Ukraine. I'd like to say that if we do not have such a mandatory mechanism for discussion, the communities will not participate in setting priorities as well as what needs to be done and how it needs to be done. Well, now speaking about donors, I'd recommend them being more flexible in their procedures. I'm not gonna elaborate on that. This is a topic for a separate conversation, and we can talk about it for hours. And traditional matter is the matter of coordination. That has been discussed for decades now and still hasn't been resolved. Here we're talking about using technical aid from the government of Ukraine because there is constant duplication. They are duplicating the requests that are submitted to donor organization, and the majority of donors in Ukraine are working on the same projects under different titles with different subtleties and details. But the government should set the priorities, which they are not doing. And again, the donors, there are lots of different facilities that have to coordinate the work of the donors and approve it, but sadly, it hasn't been properly implemented on our side. Well, this is it. Here are my pieces of advice. Thank you. Anyone else? Let me jump in. Well, I won't be able to give 3 pieces of advice, but probably I'll just add to what other presenters mentioned. First, I'll be repeating. You know, if we look, if we have the first note, a C, that music starts with, the distance from community to the government helps you when you are using this basic approach, when you're playing this basic note, because without this basic note, you cannot engage or attract additional fund. And this is what Alexander mentioned. And we have to show what is happening with the project that we started with the help of the donors, how it is developing, how it is evolving. The second thing is we're not properly using the potential of the regions, not only at the level of oblast administrations, but also oblast councils, because this is where they are coordinating and accumulating potential of development of all the communities in the regions. And the projects that can be acceptable for the donors can get together. You know, this can be large development projects. I think that is something underestimated both at the national level as well as the regional level, because they are the ones who only see their territory, and they can give advice to the communities, help them coordinate their efforts to attract investment so that we're not duplicating effort. And this is also something that will allow them to build capacity of smallest communities so that they are not left behind, so that they can help them with development, reconstruction, etc. And again, this is an international platform for working with our international partners, international finance institutions, and I would like to express the gratitude to Bankwatch, because everything that is now being prepared, basically each letter mentions Ukraine and what Ukraine needs about streamlining their procedures and the needs of Ukrainian communities. Thank you for that. And if I may, I would like to make a quick comment about the regional level. Well, actually, we have some facilities that should do that. We have the Agency for Regional Development who are supposed to do that, but sadly they are not. And this is yet another thing that we should go back to. Transformation, maybe rebooting, or I don't know. The Agencies of Regional Development that would commit to doing that.
Дякую всім учасникам.
Thank you. All thanks to all the participants and today's presenters.
Ми дуже гарно
I believe that we had a very fruitful conversation today. The time is up,
бачу якісь питання, які ми
but I still see some questions.
Так,
And thanks to the translators. It was very good translation.
проглянемо ще питання, які
And,
залишилися. але
Okay, we'll take a look at the question that we have left, but I suggest we wind up for today. Keep in touch. I'll share our research with you. We'll share it with all the registered participants. Enjoy the rest of your day. Stay safe and let's keep up the good job. Thank you. Bye. Vlada, thank you. Thank you all. Bye bye. All the best.